I'm not a good person to answer this question because, you know, I'm not an academic. I make films, it's what I do. And I'm very uncomfortable with the term avant-garde. If I understand avant-garde correctly, it's a term that comes from the military. It's the column that goes ahead. It's the leading column when traditionally in the old-fashioned style of war, when an army would go from one country to another, the avant-garde was like the first column. I'm a war resister. I left South Africa not to go to the army. So it would be crazy for me to be part of an artistic movement that comes etymologically from war and from the military. I'm against the military. So in that sense, etymologically, I totally reject the term avant-garde. There is a historical avant-garde we know in cinema. And this period, I think, becomes fetishized. You know, the 1920s and 1930s, the kind of high period of European avant-garde, like the Russians and the French. And in teaching it and in academicizing it, this period becomes turned into a fetish. And then people canonize and obsessively worship this period. So that doesn't interest me so much. I think Dziga Vertov is interesting not to go back for me to what he was doing and how he was responding in media to his time, but for me to be inspired by him to do my own thing, to do my own work and invent my own inventions. I'm very suspicious of replicating, of duplicating certain formal mechanisms which belong to the history of the avant-garde, and then if you do them in your own practice, then you belong to the avant-garde. To me, that's the contradiction of those practices. When I look at those Duchamp films, anemic cinema and that, Duchamp isn't asking you to copy him. You know, Duchamp is doing Duchamp, that's it. And my interest in cinema is to do my thing, to find my thing. And if someone else finds it avant-garde, that's their definition of me, but it's got nothing to do with my definition of me. So I as a filmmaker, I want to work with images and sounds, and mainly the images are moving, but sometimes they are still, and sometimes the sounds are still as well. It's not always that sound means sound. Sound can also mean stillness. And that's really all I do. To mention other directors is so dangerous because there are so many of them. You know, there are thousands that have influenced me and that I have loved. Just 2 days ago, I saw a film by an Italian director whose name I can't, Paolo Sorrentino, a film called The Consequences of Love. Now, I don't know what that would be in Italian, Conseguenze di Amore or something like that. So anyway, this film has an opening shot that is so beautiful, that is so profound, that you will remember for the rest of your life. And it was like electricity watching this shot. And the whole film is beautiful, but that shot is so incredible. So once again, I thought to myself watching it, I thought immediately I was filled with this jealousy of like, why didn't I make that shot? You know, fuck this guy, I want to make that shot. But the worst thing you could ever do would be now make that shot again in another film, Death. He, in that film, has found a way of opening a film that is among the greatest openings in all of cinema. It's just great. It's up there with anything Visconti ever shot. It's just up there, you know, it's fantastic. And to see that, not that even if the film isn't even avant-garde, but that shot somehow belongs to an avant-garde tradition. It's a very rigorous shot. There's it's perfectly framed, and there's a long elevator like you get in airports, and a person starts deep in the distance on this elevator, and the shot just stands there, and this person slowly comes, and the elevator goes slowly, and the shot's just so perfect. And then right at the end, as the person steps off the rolling elevator, the camera moves with them. And it's such a glorious movement because what you're expecting all the time you're watching the shot, you're expecting him to cut the minute he ends the trip. The fact that he moves now becomes a kind of amazing pressure that you get in your heart, like, and he's got you by the throat from that opening shot, and he keeps you in this film all the way through. So why am I telling you all this? Because that's just a film I saw 2 days ago, but there are thousands of examples like this. I could spend the rest of this year just telling you about all these great scenes that I love in other people's films. The truth is one has to actually get rid of other people's films and just make one's own films. And the worst thing is this kind of fetish of always quoting other people's films in your films, you know. I think some people call it postmodern, or Tarantino does it a lot. And it's kind of like funny or clever that you always got quotes. I think it's poverty. I think it's bankruptcy. It's when people really don't have anything to say, so they go and quote John Ford or they quote Hitchcock, you know. Who needs it? And a lot of avant-garde cinema these days, a lot of these so-called avant-garde films are just quotes. They're just compendiums of quotes. Well, I don't think that's interesting. So first of all, it's very difficult for me to say because I'm really only here for this evening and I go back tomorrow morning. I was lucky enough in Oberhausen this year to see one film that will be screening here, I think on Tuesday night. She's a Greek director, her name is Maria Kurkuta, and the film is Return to Eola Street. Well, I saw that film in competition in Oberhausen and it made me cry. It was so deep and so powerful, the music is so extremely moving, and the relationship to image. It's a found footage film, black and white. It uses lots of scenes from different Greek feature films of the 1950s, and it recontextualizes them and becomes a new work. So in a way it sounds like I'm contradicting what I just said earlier about quoting, but the thing about what she does with this film, which is so vivid and very powerful, is that she makes this found footage her own. So it becomes her own statement. And it's tragically beautiful. It is an exquisite film. Really, I would recommend everybody in this festival to go and see that film. In that festival in Germany, where I saw maybe 150 films, short films, that was by far the best film, by far. And it did win a prize at the festival. It didn't win the main prize, which I thought was a disgrace. I thought it was a scandal because it was so obviously the best film. So I would recommend any Greek person who loves Greek cinema and who loves the music and the language, you have to see that film. Return to Eola Street, you'll see it in the catalogue. I might be saying the title wrongly. And Maria Kurkuta, just please say it. There's only one that I know that's any good, and that's a woman called Claire Angelique. She made a feature film, you're talking of her? Okay, so Claire made a film called My Black Little Heart, about 5 years ago. An extraordinary film. She acts in the film herself, she wrote it herself, she directed it herself. By a long way, the best South African feature ever made. Fantastic film, just fantastic film. Claire Angelique is a genius, amazing. Her second film, terrible. So that's a weird thing. Her second film didn't work at all, but I don't think that matters. Her first film is just, even if she never makes another good film in her life, the fact that she made that film, My Black Little Heart, it's a classic. You've got to see it. South Africa really is waiting. I think mainly because the politics are so fucked up. South Africa is a fake democracy. It's a masked democracy. It's not a free country at all. It's a police state pretending to be a democracy. And because of that, artists have been bought in and filmmakers have been bought in by the system to make propaganda for this new South Africa, to pretend that we have this new South Africa. And these films are fake films. They're like the Soviet socialist realism films where you make the proud workers. Well, now you have the liberated free whites and blacks together fighting for one rainbow nation. But it's actually a lie. So those films are lies and those filmmakers are liars. To make those films, they're doing it for the money because that's what the system wants them to make. And an entire generation of artists, musicians, poets, novelists have been bought in this new democratic myth in South Africa because the government saw, it was very clever, it realized we mustn't have the artists criticizing us, we must have all the artists telling everybody this is a new South Africa. And everybody bought into that. I mean, just about everybody. It's shocking. It's a scandal. It's a great scandal. So yet, I cannot yet tell you more than Claire. Francois Verster has made some interesting documentaries. But by and large, most South African cinema is still very naive and not very good. Well, I'm going to be for 1 week in England now, and I'm going to be filming a pianist called Daniel Ben Pienaar, playing a composition by a South African composer called Arnold van Wyk, called Nachtmuziek, Night Music. And he's giving performances in London and in Oxford, and I'm going to be filming these performances and interviewing him. and make a kind of documentary portrait about, not so much about the playing of the music, but I'm interested in how he prepares himself to go into a 24-minute piece of music that he plays without, he learns 24 minutes of music off by heart. And I'm curious to see the state of mind he has to go into and how he decides to phrase a note, to place a note. The score gives tempo and that, but there are very different ways that this music has been played. And I'm curious about his particular approach to each note, on the level of the note. In 24 minutes there are thousands of notes, and I want to know from him why this note is played with this attack, why that note is played slowly, why the tempo changes. How does he approach these notes? I'm very fascinated by that micro miniature work on a big piece, because it's an epic piece of music. But I think to understand such an epic, you have to work on the micro level, you have to work on the small level. So that's kind of what I intend to do this week too. A lot of interviews and a lot of filming of rehearsals. And I'm going to use this, it's a Nokia. I'm going to use this. What's nice about this is that I can get very, very close to him. It's quite a wide lens, it's a 25mm lens. And like you there now, I can get really close, but I'm not really irritating you, am I? I'm not really disturbing you. So the physicality of that camera is a bit more intrusive. This camera, because it's flat, it doesn't have this sort of penis sticking out of it, Anyway, that's my project.